So in order for us to explain to the customer how the fuel system works, we need to be able to figure out how the fuel gets from the bottom of the tank through the carburetor, mixes with the air and the fuel just right, and is delivered to the intake valve so that it can go in the cylinder on the intake stroke. That's our challenge today. Let's get to it. On the intake stroke, the piston moves down in the cylinder. When it moves down in the cylinder, it's creating a vacuum. A low pressure area in the cylinder is important because it creates a pressure differential. A pressure differential is when there is a low pressure in one area and a high pressure in another area, and that causes something to move. Each one of us experiences a pressure differential all the time, and that's when we breathe. When we breathe in, our diaphragm below our lungs moves down. When it moves down, it creates space for our lungs to, or a vacuum, or a low pressure area, for our lungs to bring air in. We have high pressure out here in the atmosphere. We have a low pressure that we're creating in our lungs. That allows air movement to go in.
So let's look at our engine. We already talked about our piston moving down in the cylinder on the intake stroke. That creates a vacuum. We have a high pressure out here in the air and the atmosphere all around, okay? All of this out here. And we have a low pressure in the cylinder. That causes air movement, just like in your lungs. And so air goes through the filter, into the carburetor, through the intake valve, and into the cylinder. So now let's look directly at our carburetor. Over on this side is where the cylinder block is. This is our cylinder block. And we have our piston and our cylinder, and that's moving down over on this side. When the piston goes down on the intake stroke, the intake valve opens. This is my intake valve, and it goes up and opens. And we've got a low pressure area here, high pressure area in the atmosphere, and that causes air to enter the carburetor and go through the carburetor, travel all the way to the intake valve into the cylinder. What does it do along the way so that we can get fuel, comes from the bottom of the fuel tank all the way up into the path of the air where it needs to be and gets delivered to the intake valve? That's the question we're going to answer so we can explain it well to the customer.